Hi, my name is Liba. I'm 22 years old and I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a university student studying business administration, but there's something about me that might surprise you. I've struggled with English, even though I've been learning it for years, and not just speaking English, but thinking in English. You might wonder, Liba, aren't you in the US? Don't you speak English every day? Yes, I do, but speaking English and thinking in English are two very different things. Let me tell you my story. I grew up in a bilingual household. My parents are originally from Mexico, so Spanish was the first language I learned at home. We spoke mostly Spanish, and even though I learned English in school, I always translated everything in my head before I spoke. If someone asked me, "How was your weekend?" my brain would first think in Spanish, then I would translate it into English and say, "My weekend was good." It might seem like a small thing, but this habit made my English slow. Conversations felt exhausting. I always needed a few extra seconds to respond, and sometimes, by the time I was ready to say something, the topic had already changed. I realized that this habit was holding me back. If I wanted to speak fluently, I had to stop thinking in Spanish. I had to start thinking in English. The first realization, the first time I noticed this problem, was in my college classes. My professor would ask a question, and my classmates would answer quickly. I, on the other hand, would sit there translating in my head. I understood the question, but by the time I was ready to answer, someone else had already spoken. One day, my professor asked me a direct question in class. I panicked. I knew the answer, but my brain was busy translating. I could feel the eyes of my classmates on me. After a long pause, I finally answered. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't natural either. After class, my friend Mia noticed my frustration. "Liba, you know English. What's stopping you?" she asked. "I always think in Spanish first," I admitted. She laughed. "That's your problem. You need to stop translating and start thinking in English." She was right. But how? Step 1. Surrounding myself with English. The first thing I did was change my environment. Even though I lived in the US, I realized I was still living in Spanish. My phone was in Spanish, my Netflix shows mostly in Spanish, even my grocery lists were in Spanish. So I made a decision. I would switch everything to English. I changed my phone settings, I started watching shows in English without subtitles, I listened to English podcasts, and I even set reminders in English on my phone. It felt strange at first, but my brain slowly started adjusting. Step 2. Speaking to myself in English. One day I was walking home from class, and I decided to talk to myself in English. Not out loud. I didn't want people to think I was crazy, but in my head, I started narrating my day. Instead of thinking, I forced myself to think. I'm going to do my homework when I get home. At first, I had to concentrate, but after a few days, it became easier. My brain started processing things in English naturally. Step 3. Thinking in simple sentences. Another problem I faced was that my Spanish thoughts were too complicated. I would try to translate them word for word, and it didn't always make sense in English. So I started using simple English in my thoughts. For example, instead of thinking, "see," I would think, I hope it doesn't rain later because I need to go to the store. Short, simple, direct. Step 4. Describing what I see. One of the best exercises I did was describing things around me in English. When I was at a coffee shop, I would look around and think, the barista is making coffee. That man is reading a book. This coffee smells good. At first, it was slow, but over time, my brain started doing it automatically. Step 5. Talking without worrying about mistakes. One of the biggest things that slowed me down was my fear of making mistakes. Every time I spoke, I worried about my grammar. But then, I remembered something my English professor told me. Native speakers make mistakes too. She was right. I had heard my American friends say things like, "Me and my friend went to the store," which isn't grammatically correct, but people still say it. I realized that fluency is more important than perfection, so I started speaking without overthinking. If I made a mistake, I kept going, and something amazing happened. I became more confident. The turning point. A few months later, I had a big moment. I was in a group discussion in one of my classes. The professor asked a question, and before I even realized it, I answered without translating in my head. It was natural. It was automatic. The journey never stops. After that moment in class, I felt a new level of confidence, but the journey to thinking in English didn't stop there. I had to keep practicing, keep pushing myself, and keep challenging my mind. One of the biggest tests came when I had to give a presentation in front of my entire class. Public speaking is scary for most people, but for me, it was even harder. My brain was still adjusting, and I was afraid that under pressure, I might go back to translating in my head. So, I prepared differently. This time, instead of writing my speech in Spanish and then translating it, I forced myself to write everything directly in English. I practiced out loud. I recorded myself speaking and listened back. On the day of the presentation, I was nervous, but something incredible happened. When I stood in front of the class, I started speaking without thinking about Spanish at all. The words just came naturally. I wasn't just speaking English, I was thinking in English. Without fear, without hesitation. That moment made me realize that learning a language is not just about words and grammar, it's about changing the way you think. Overcoming challenges. Of course, there were still challenges. Sometimes when I was tired, my brain wanted to go back to Spanish, and there were moments when I still felt stuck on certain words. But instead of getting frustrated, I reminded myself, this is normal. I started keeping a small notebook where I wrote down words or phrases that I struggled with. Every night before bed, I would review them. Little by little, those words became part of my natural thoughts. Another challenge was speaking with native speakers who talked too fast. At first, I felt overwhelmed, but I developed a strategy. Instead of trying to understand every single word, I focused on the context. For example, if someone said, "Hey, want to grab a bite?" I didn't stop to think, what does grab a bite mean exactly? Instead, I understood from the situation that they were inviting me to eat. This mindset helped me stop overanalyzing and just go with the flow. The moment I knew I had changed. A few months after my journey started, something funny happened. I was walking through campus, texting my friend, when I suddenly realized I had written the whole message in English without even thinking about Spanish. I stopped for a second. I wasn't translating. I wasn't hesitating. My brain had fully switched to English. That was the moment I knew I had finally trained my mind to think in English. Thinking in English isn't about being perfect. It's about making English a natural part of your life. If you're struggling right now, don't worry. It takes time, but it's possible. Just remember, stop translating in your head. Surround yourself with English every day. Talk to yourself in English, use simple sentences, and grow from there. Accept that mistakes are part of learning. If you keep practicing, one day you'll realize that your brain has made the switch, just like mine did. The power of patience and persistence. After I realized my brain had started thinking in English, I felt proud, but I also knew that this was just the beginning. Learning a language is not something you do once and then stop. It's a continuous journey. Even after making so much progress, I still had moments when my mind would switch back to Spanish, especially when I was tired or stressed. At first, I was frustrated. Why am I still thinking in Spanish sometimes? But then I reminded myself, this is normal. Our brains are naturally wired to go back to the language we are most comfortable with. That's why I had to be consistent. So, I created a daily routine to make sure I didn't lose my progress. My daily routine to keep thinking in English every day. Morning routine in English. As soon as I woke up, I narrated my morning in English. I need to brush my teeth. I'll make some coffee. I have a class at 10 a.m. This set my brain in English mode for the day. Writing my thoughts before bed. I would write a short journal entry in English about my day. It didn't have to be perfect, but it helped me process my thoughts in English before sleeping. Speaking English even when alone. Whenever I was alone, I practiced speaking out loud. If I was driving, I would talk about what I saw on the road. If I was cooking, I would say, "Now I'm cutting the onions. This smells amazing." English conversations. I told my friends and classmates that I wanted to practice more, so even when I was with my Spanish-speaking friends, we challenged each other to speak only in English for at least 30 minutes. Using English to solve problems. If I was thinking about something stressful, like an assignment or an important decision, I forced myself to think through the problem in English. It helped me train my brain to handle even complex thoughts in English. These small steps made a huge difference. The first dream in English. One of the craziest moments in my journey was the first time I dreamed in English. I remember waking up feeling shocked. My entire dream had been in English. I had spoken in English, and even the people in my dream were speaking in English. That's when I knew my brain had truly adapted. It didn't mean that I would never think in Spanish again, but it showed me that my efforts were working, helping others who struggle with the same problem. After going through this journey, I started noticing that many people around me were struggling with the same thing, especially international students at my university. One day, I met a girl named Sophia who had recently moved from Colombia. She was fluent in English, but she told me she still thought in Spanish all the time. I smiled and said, "I used to be exactly like you." I shared my story with her, and she was shocked. "But you sound so natural in English," she said. "Because I train my brain," I told her. "You can do it too." She started following my daily routine, and after a few months, she told me, "Liba, I just realized I was thinking in English without even trying." That made me so happy because I knew how powerful this skill was. Over time, my daily routine of thinking in English evolved into something more profound, an integral part of who I was becoming. I began to notice that the language wasn't just a tool for conversation, it was reshaping my perspective on life. One brisk autumn morning, I found myself preparing for a group project meeting in one of my business classes. The room buzzed with excitement and ideas, and I felt ready to contribute in a way I hadn't before. During the brainstorming session, when others hesitated or fumbled for words, my thoughts flowed naturally in English. I blurted out, "What if we use digital storytelling to connect with our audience on a more personal level?" The suggestion wasn't rehearsed or meticulously translated. It was pure, spontaneous creativity. The group fell silent for a moment before erupting into discussion. In that instant, I realized that my inner voice, once burdened by constant translation, had become a powerful asset. Soon after that pivotal meeting, an opportunity presented itself that would further test and refine my newfound fluency. I secured an internship at a thriving startup in Austin, a company known for its innovative approach and fast-paced environment. Walking into the office on my first day, I was both excited and nervous. I knew that in the world of business, precision and quick thinking were essential, and I was determined to meet those expectations. The internship was a whirlwind of meetings, project deadlines, and impromptu brainstorming sessions. At one team meeting, while discussing strategies to revamp our marketing campaign, I encountered an unfamiliar business idiom. Instead of freezing up or mentally reverting to Spanish, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would ask for clarification later and learn from it. That evening, after a long day of absorbing new information, I sat at my desk, researching the idiom. With each new term I learned, my confidence grew. I began to see that every challenge was an opportunity to enrich my vocabulary and deepen my understanding of the language. Beyond the office, my campus life provided endless chances to practice. I joined the English Language Club, where students from all over the world gathered to discuss literature, debate current events, and share their experiences learning English. These meetings became a highlight of my week. In the relaxed atmosphere of the club, I found that I could experiment with idiomatic expressions, ask questions without fear, and even laugh at my own mistakes. One evening, after a passionate debate about American literature, I sat on the campus lawn beneath a canopy of stars. I reflected on the years when I struggled to string together even a simple sentence. Now, not only was I fluent, but I was also able to articulate my opinions and feelings with ease. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a reminder that every small step along the way had led me to this place of confidence and clarity. I also began to appreciate that thinking in English didn't mean abandoning my roots. Even as my mind increasingly operated in English, the rich tapestry of my cultural heritage remained with me. I still dreamed in Spanish sometimes, and on quiet days, I would catch myself switching effortlessly between the two languages. This duality wasn't a weakness. Rather, it was a strength that allowed me to see the world through multiple perspectives. I realized that being bilingual gave me a unique ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds, and that versatility was something to be celebrated. At the office, during yet another busy week, I was tasked with leading a small project team. We had to develop a proposal for a new client, and I was responsible for organizing our ideas and ensuring that every team member felt heard. In that role, I found that my internal dialogue in English helped me structure my thoughts clearly and assertively. I started jotting down ideas on a whiteboard, explaining each point with clarity. When the client visited for a preliminary meeting, I confidently presented our proposal. The presentation flowed naturally, and I answered questions with a newfound ease. That impressed not only my colleagues but also the client. That day, I realized that thinking in English had become a cornerstone of my professional identity. Even as my confidence soared, there were moments when the old habits crept in. Late at night, while studying for an exam or working on a challenging project, I sometimes found myself drifting into familiar Spanish expressions. In those instances, I'd pause and gently steer my thoughts back, reminding myself of all the progress I had made. I kept a small notebook in my backpack where I jotted down new phrases or expressions that I encountered during the day. Each note was a small victory, a tangible record of my ongoing journey. Reviewing those notes became a nightly ritual that reinforced my commitment to learning and adapting. Reflecting on my journey, I began to see that the transformation wasn't solely about mastering a language. It was about evolving as a person. The process taught me patience, resilience, and the courage to step out of my comfort zone. Every conversation, every meeting, every moment of self-doubt overcome contributed to the mosaic of my personal growth. I learned that it wasn't about erasing my past, but about weaving it into a broader narrative that embraced both my heritage and my aspirations. Now, as I move forward in both my academic and professional life, I carry with me the confidence of a mind that has learned to think in English, a confidence that opens doors, fosters creativity, and builds bridges between cultures. I look back on my early struggles with gratitude because they set me on a path to discover the limitless possibilities of language and self-expression. In the quiet moments when I find myself reflecting on the path I've traveled, I smile at the thought of all those little breakthroughs, each one a testament to perseverance and the transformative power of language. I know that there will always be new challenges ahead, new expressions to master, and new cultural nuances to understand. But now I embrace them with open arms, confident that my inner dialogue will continue to evolve, carrying me toward even greater horizons. My journey of thinking in English is a living story, one that continues with every new experience, every conversation, and every dream. And as I forge ahead, I hope that my story inspires others to take that first brave step, to allow their thoughts to break free, and to discover the profound freedom that comes with truly thinking in a new language. One evening, as I walked home from my internship, I thought about how far I had come. The streets of Austin were alive with the hum of conversations, the scent of food trucks filling the air, and the distant sound of live music echoing from a nearby bar. It was a perfect representation of my own journey, vibrant, constantly changing, and full of new experiences. I stopped by a small cafe near my apartment to grab a coffee. While waiting in line, I overheard a group of international students struggling to order in English. Their words were hesitant, their accents thick with uncertainty. I saw a younger version of myself in them, nervous, afraid of making mistakes. Without thinking, I stepped forward and smiled at them. "Hey, are you guys new here?" I asked gently. They looked at me, a bit surprised but relieved that someone was speaking to them in a way that felt welcoming. One of the students, a girl with dark curly hair, nodded. "Yes, we just arrived last week. English is hard," she admitted, with a small laugh. I smiled, understanding her completely. "I know exactly how you feel," I said. "I used to be just like you." Their eyes widened. "But you sound so natural," another student, a boy from Korea, said. "Trust me, it wasn't always this way," I assured them. "I struggled a lot, but I found ways to train my brain to think in English, and once I did that, everything became easier." They were curious, and as we waited for our drinks, I shared some of my experiences. I told them about my routine, how I narrated my day in English, how I challenged myself to think in English even when no one was around. They listened eagerly, nodding at each tip I gave them. When our drinks were ready, the girl, whose name was Anna, hesitated before saying, "Thank you for talking to us. It helps to know that someone else has been through this." I smiled warmly. "You're not alone. It just takes time, but one day you'll realize you're thinking in English without even trying." As I walked back to my apartment, I felt something deep inside me, something I hadn't fully recognized before. I had become the person I once wished for, the friend, the guide, the proof that it is possible to change the way you think. The unexpected test. A few months later, I was invited to a networking event for young professionals in Austin. It was an exciting opportunity to meet people in my field, but it was also a test of how far I had come. In the past, events like these would have terrified me. The thought of having to make small talk, introduce myself, and sound confident in English would have made me anxious. But this time, I walked into the event with my head held high. I introduced myself to different people, joined conversations effortlessly, and even cracked a joke or two. At one point, I met a senior manager from a well-known marketing firm. We talked about trends in digital media, and before I knew it, I was explaining my ideas with passion and confidence. He listened intently and then said, "Liba, you have great insight. Have you ever thought about applying for a position at our company?" For a moment, I was speechless. Was this really happening? I smiled and said, "I would love to." That night, as I walked home, I felt something powerful. Thinking in English wasn't just about language anymore. It had become a part of who I was. It had given me confidence, opportunities, and a way to connect with people I never would have met otherwise. In the months that followed, my world began to transform in ways I had never imagined. Every day became a blend of new challenges and small victories, each one a testament to how far I had come. I remember one evening after a long day juggling classes, my internship, and community volunteering, I found myself sitting alone in the campus garden. The dusk painted the sky with hues of purple and orange as I watched a group of students laugh and share stories. In that quiet moment, I realized that thinking in English wasn't just about fluency. It had become a bridge to connect with people, ideas, and a world that was constantly evolving around me. That realization hit me hard when I was invited to a local cultural fair in Austin. The fair was a vibrant celebration of our diverse community, where food, music, and art from all corners of the globe came together. I was tasked with assisting at a booth that promoted bilingual education, a cause close to my heart. There, I worked alongside Carlos, a passionate educator from El Paso, and Jennifer, a dynamic community organizer who had dedicated her life to empowering immigrant families. Together, we engaged visitors in conversation, answered questions, and shared stories about our experiences with language and identity. One conversation in particular stood out. A nervous young man named Daniel, who had recently moved from Honduras, approached our booth. His eyes were filled with a mix of hope and anxiety as he explained in broken English that he wanted to improve his language skills to secure a better job. I recognized that familiar feeling of uncertainty from my own early days. I knelt beside him and said, "Daniel, every new word you learn is a step forward. I remember the fear I felt when I first tried to think in English, but every mistake made me stronger." His smile that day, shy yet determined, reminded me that every challenge was a chance to grow, and that I too was growing with every passing moment. At the same time, my academic life was taking on new dimensions. In class discussions, I no longer hesitated or second-guessed my words. Instead, I contributed with clarity and conviction, often finding that my ability to think quickly in English gave me a unique perspective on complex problems. My professors noticed the difference too. Professor Jacobs, who had long been my mentor, once told me, "Liba, your journey has taught you that language is more than grammar or vocabulary. It's about expressing your truth." His words resonated deeply with me, reinforcing the idea that my bilingualism was not a hindrance, but a powerful tool that enriched every facet of my life. Balancing these new responsibilities was not always easy. There were nights when the weight of expectations, academic deadlines, work projects, and community commitments seemed overwhelming. I often found solace in my journal, a quiet sanctuary where I could reflect on both my triumphs and my struggles. In the pages of that journal, I wrote about moments of doubt, when my thoughts slipped back into Spanish, and about the fierce determination it took to steer myself back into English. Over time, I began to see these instances not as setbacks, but as natural parts of my learning process. They were reminders that growth often comes with moments of vulnerability. One crisp winter evening, as the campus lay under a blanket of soft snow, I attended a special event at the community center where I volunteered. The event was designed for new immigrants to practice English in a friendly, low-pressure environment. Among the attendees was Lucia, a bright and spirited woman from Peru, who struggled with confidence in her spoken English, despite her wealth of ideas. I shared my own story with her, the countless hours of self-talk, the fears of mispronunciation, and the eventual breakthrough that taught me to embrace imperfection. Lucia's eyes lit up with a mix of relief and newfound determination. "Maybe," she said softly, "I can finally stop worrying so much and just speak." That simple exchange reinforced my belief that the power of language lies not in flawless delivery, but in the courage to express oneself authentically. As spring approached, life continued to offer both challenges and unexpected opportunities. A few weeks after the fair, I received an invitation to speak at a local panel discussion on bilingual education and cultural identity. The thought of addressing an audience comprising educators, students, and community leaders both excited and terrified me. I spent countless hours preparing, not only by refining my speech in English, but by ensuring that my words resonated with the heart of my experiences. On the day of the panel, as I stood before the crowd, I felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with calm confidence. I spoke about my journey, from a hesitant translator in my own mind to someone who now lived and breathed English every day. I talked about the struggles, the late nights of self-doubt, and the eventual realization that language is a living, evolving part of who we are. The applause that followed was not just for the words I had spoken, but for the journey I represented, a journey of persistence, self-discovery, and the transformative power of embracing a new way of thinking. That day, after the event, I took a long walk along the tree-lined streets of my neighborhood. The cool breeze whispered promises of change and growth. I thought about my parents, who had always spoken to me in Spanish, and how their love and support had laid the foundation for my success. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for both sides of my identity, the comfort of my native language, and the bold adventure of thinking in English. In that balance, I had found a strength that allowed me to navigate the complexities of life with greater ease. Every experience, every conversation, and every moment of self-doubt had converged to create a mosaic of resilience and transformation. I knew that there would always be days when my thoughts slipped back into Spanish, days when the familiar rhythm of my native tongue would resurface. But I also understood that each of those moments was an integral part of my journey, a reminder of where I had come from and how far I had traveled. Today, as I continue to walk this path, I embrace every aspect of my bilingual identity. I no longer see thinking in English as a goal to be achieved, but as an ever-evolving process that enriches my perspective and connects me to a world of infinite possibilities. With every conversation, every new word learned, and every moment of shared understanding, I celebrate the unique blend of languages that shapes who I am. And so, My story goes on. A journey of learning, of growing, and of daring to express the deepest parts of my soul in a language that once seemed so distant. It is a story that reminds me, and perhaps others, that true progress is not measured by the absence of mistakes, but by the willingness to keep moving forward, to keep embracing the beauty of expression, and to keep believing in the transformative power of language. In the following months, life unfolded in unexpected ways that deepened my connection with English and, more importantly, with myself. Every morning as I sipped my coffee on the small balcony of my apartment in Austin, I would reflect on the new challenges the day might bring. I was no longer just a student navigating college classes or juggling an internship. My world had expanded to include mentoring, public speaking, and even creative projects that merged my personal experiences with my passion for language. One crisp April morning, I received an invitation to attend a regional conference on bilingual education and cultural identity in New York City. The invitation came from Karen Smith, a respected professor of linguistics whom I had met during one of my university workshops. Karen had told me that she was compiling stories about language learning for an upcoming publication, and that my journey was one of the most inspiring examples she had encountered. The thought of sharing my story with a larger audience filled me with both excitement and nervous anticipation. When the day of the conference arrived, I found myself stepping into a grand auditorium buzzing with the energy of educators, students, and professionals from across the country.